Hello there and welcome to a very special Christmas edition of GENVFX's tutorial. One by ones, yes, or one at a time. No, the one by ones. This is a special Christmas one for you all, and it is to do with a couple of modifiers today. Make it a double issue because it's Christmas, and also because they're both really good, and they both are very handy when you put on something which is animating, if you're going for a particular style or look. And as it says at the very beginning here, they are decimate and remesh. Decimate basically takes all of your polygons in your object and goes, what can I do to reduce these the best possible way? Basically, you can either collapse them, which says, right, I'm going to remove a load. You can unsubdivide them, which basically what that tries to do is say, it does the opposite of a subdivide, basically. So what it does is says, right, okay, the subdivide says I'm going to put loads of polygons in to make it look really nice. And unsubdivide says, right, what can I remove to keep the integrity of the shape? Of course, you go between values of 0 and 1 with these things on the ratios, and that means you can either have like everything all there, or nothing there at all, or at least the barest minimum to give you the indication of the object. And then the final one in the group on decimate is planar. And planar kind of tries to force things into straight edges based on either the object's hard edges or materials or seams or so on. So let's very quickly, with our little Christmassy scene, you might notice that there's something there, just slightly visible there. Yes, I built a reindeer. I could not resist it. It's Christmas after all. It's not particularly... in fact, the modelling's okay for a low poly model. The walk cycle, please forgive me, it's not great. So, but let's just get into this, and let's just very quickly stick on this a decimate. Now, at the moment, obviously, everything's set up perfectly normally. There is our collapse. There's our unsubdivide, and there's our planar. And then here's our ratio. So I'm going to leave it on collapse. And I'm going to bring down that ratio, and you can see we're getting a very nice boily kind of walk, which actually is really nice, and it's very stylized. Obviously you don't necessarily want that. And here is the joy. One of the joys of the modifier stack in Blender is that I want this to reduce, but I don't want it to flicker, because what that's doing is reducing as the object is animating. So it's almost kind of stop framing in a way. It's almost like angular fingerprints, if you see what I mean. But if I move it above the armature, because Blender's ace, what it does is it'll do the subdivide on the object, even though you've rigged it, and it'll carry on kind of interpolating what's there. So any of the points that you had in your rig, which were connected, which are no longer there, it kind of interpolates and works that out, which is really clever. So if I reduce this ratio all the way down, what you end up with, just moving it all the way down, that's a single line with two vertices. Love it. If I take it just slightly up, so what we have here is it's almost like a cardboard or a paper folded object, which is almost but not quite something entirely unlike a reindeer, because reindeers don't have beaks, but the other thing is that it does have that kind of feel. So if I take this all the way back up to the top, so we're back to our regular reindeer, stick it on unsubdivide, and this kind of works the other way, where you have to increase the iterations of the amount of unsubdivision that you want. So if I just take this up to 1, you can see how it starts to triangulate. In fact, let me very quickly, because it might make things a bit easier to see, pop on the wireframe. There you go. So there we have our unsubdivision iteration of 1, and what that pretty much does, it triangulates. That's what it does. But as you increase the iterations, it starts to drop the polygonal count of your object in the nicest way it can, while still trying to keep the integrity of the object you had there. And you can see the face count is reducing. There's only 642 faces. Increase iterations again. That's getting a little bit blocky. And the face count's gone down by about 72 faces, so that's 590. And again, and as you increase these iterations, if I just do it a little bit faster, so we go up as high as we can go before it stops, so it won't go any higher at a certain point. That's about 14, probably a little bit less. But what we've got there is a stumpy, pointy-footy reindeer that is walking above the world. It's okay, kind of does the job. So let's take that back down to the iterations of 0, pop it onto planar, and now you can see the limiting of it. So we can say do it based on the angle of the normal. So because the angle limit is already set to 5, you can start to see some faces, sorry, some edges which were there, which have about a limit of about 5 degrees between them, it kind of gets rid of those. So if we just keep on putting this up, you can see how it's reducing where those polygons are by reducing the edges, but still trying to keep that integrity. Again, it can be quite useful. I mean, the more you take it up, the more bonkers it will look. That's beyond a shadow of a doubt. Let's set that to 90. And it's doing its best to try and create those edges, and you also see that it's not working in relation to the armature, i.e. it's doing it, but it's also kind of like popping quite a bit because the armature is kind of like re-dragging the points. I don't really, I have to say, I honestly don't really think of a point where I've actually used planar. However, saying that, I have seams in my object. So if I increase the value of this subdivision here, you'll see it tries to keep the integrity of the seams that I used when I was putting on my texture vertices. So you can see there's a seam here, there's a seam around the leg, there's a seam along the front of here, and there's a seam around the neck, just there. And these are the kind of things where maybe that has a use. So you can take an object and bring it all the way down to as close to where it is in the UV space without ruining the boundary edges. So you can actually create boundary edges or UV seams or just polygon seams, and then from that you can sort of like say, well, I can bring it all the way down as far as I want to, but I need to keep the integrity on these particular ones. So that's basically decimate. And I have to say, I do love doing this, and I really like that, but not as much as when I put it the other side of the armature. I just love that. It's beautiful. So that's decimate, but let's get rid of that. Let's just blow that away. Leave our reindeer happily wandering. Where's he going to stop? When's he going? He's just going, never stopping. But where's he going? North Pole, of course. How silly of me. Why did I think anything else? Right, so let's go here. And as I said, we're now going to go on to remesh. Now, straight away, we're on voxels. Now, if I could just explain something very quickly about remesh. What remesh does is it imagines a world full of vertices. And when your object is in the remesh world, what it will do, it will rebuild your object based on where the object exists inside a world of points. So if you've got loads and loads and loads and loads of points that are equidistant from each other, and then you put your object in there, it kind of builds it based on those. So volume points are referred to as voxels. So this essentially is voxels, where the size as in the size of the actual point is at 0.1 meter, which means at every point 1/10 of a meter there's a point. So you can see how this is very structured, and you can see how it's a very rigid lines that are running through this object at the minute. But if I reduce the size of that voxel, and you have to be very careful here because anything less than 0.01 will crash Blender and your machine. So I mean, it's got a workaround, I think. Yeah, don't do it. But if I take this down, you can see how the points are getting closer together. And as the points get closer together, the integrity of our object is coming back. So you're able to create, if I just click off this deer, you can see where, again, it's building itself in a live, essentially. So you are getting kind of this interesting shape. It's really quite nice. You know, it is good. And then also you can increase adaptivity. And as you increase the adaptivity, think of it more as a threshold. So if I push this further up, you can see it stops building them in certain places where it doesn't need to, because there's less change. And it's keeping the ones where you do need it. So the higher I take this, you can see the legs are still very highly detailed. There's a little bit around the muzzle and the neck, but on the back and the flank and around the neck, you know, there's only a few times when it really needs to put some extra points in. So that's really very, very clever. I mean, that's the thing about it. It's a really clever system. So I'm just going to raise up the voxel count a bit and set that adaptivity down to 0 and click on sharp. Now, whereas we had adaptivity in the voxel and sharp, we've got threshold, and it's kind of a similar thing, but I don't really seem to be able to see a lot of difference. Hang on, there we go. If we bring it all the way down, we start to get the feet in. So that's interesting. I'll put that back up to about 1. Right, so what you can do is, because of the sharpness, you can say, right, I've got this octree, which essentially is the amount of divisions that you get. And that still keeps it keeps basically the integrity of the object once again. So the higher the octree is, it's essentially the same as reducing the distance between the voxels. It's great, and again, it looks lovely like this. I'm going to drag this above the armature. That's really lovely. because of what it's doing. It's recreating the object with a bunch of sharpness. Now, if you can imagine, you've got an object, you've rigged it, and then maybe you want to do something else to it. You can see actually where some of the points aren't actually going. And I'm also going to click off this thing called remove disconnected, and you'll also see now that also the antlers aren't going either. Again, remove disconnected basically says the moment the object is broken because of the way the octree works, I don't want it to be there. But I want it to be there because I want to see where it is. And obviously now you can see it's not a part of the octree, it's not been moved by the rig. So if I move this back underneath, there you can see it's now going with it. But of course we're moving the voxels. We're pushing the armature is moving through the voxels rather than the voxels being done before the armature is moving things. So we've got, I say we've got sharp, and then the sharpness value, and we've got scale. I think it's doing much. If I set that to 0, well there you go. If I set that to 0.1, there we go, that's better. That's why, again, so this scale essentially is scaling the size of our voxel in essence, even though it's a sharp. So more of those, one nice and tight, and then the octree. If we reduce that, we get less again. So the two kind of work, they kind of work in conjunction with each other. Both do similar things. And then if I click over to smooth quickly, again you'll see the similar sort of thing. If I increase the octree and reduce the scale, let's take this down by hand. There you go. So we're increasing the size of our points by making them smaller. The larger the number, the smaller they are. I don't think we need to have them 0.999. No, we can't. That's fine. We increase the value of them by increasing the number of them. Obviously, that slows it down. And this is where it starts to look a bit weird. If I put this, if I put this above the armature, loving the antlers, and then remove disconnected, and then you kind of get things. It's not quite working. It's not quite good. It's not quite what you'd want. I'm just going to delete that remesh, and I'm going to add it again because I want it nice and fresh for the next bit. Because what I'm going to move on to now is blocks. And blocks are, in my opinion, one of the best things about the remesher, because it allows you to take anything you've done, and essentially, whereas everything else before works the voxel points, sets of different distances, or the octree for the amount of iterations, blocks does all of that as well, but it does it with squares. So straight away you click on that and you've got the octree depth and the scale. So if I increase the number of this in here, you can still, you're starting to see those other legs come back. It's just, there we go. So that's the octree set to 6. And I'm going to set it to 7, and it looks like a bunch of teeny tiny little squares. Now that's still running. That is not quite real time, but it is still running. And then if I turn off remove disconnected, we get the antlers back. So it's almost like, I'm just going to move this a bit so we can see what I mean. It's animating through the bricks. So the bricks are constant. The bricks. Oh, I've gone inside. The bricks essentially are consistent, and they're being, but we're animating our shape through them, and that is, I think that's beautiful. If you wanted something a little bit weird, I'm just going to take this back to about 6. I'm going to push this above the armature. Yeah. It's definitely got a look, has it not? Anyway, so that's it. Let me just pop this back and increase the number of those. Oh, that's nice. Yes, and let's pop it back underneath the armature, and then we have that. There you go, that's lovely. So, and also you can reduce the threshold. If I set this down to 0.1, nope, 0.01. I don't know what that's doing now. I don't know. That should actually have made some difference, but I'm guessing it's probably because it's quite a strong octree. It would be nice, in fact, if you could have it so the threshold changed it so you could have blocks that size, as well as blocks that size, as well as blocks that size based on angle. Maybe that's something for the future, potentially. Blender people. But so yeah, so that actually is I just love that. I love that. It's just so stylized and so fancy. It's so fancy. Anyway, that's it for this little Christmas special. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let's just get rid of this. And we'll go back to our little reindeer. There he is. Little reindeer. Little sleepy reindeer. Little tired sleepy reindeer. Anyway, so thank you very much for watching this. We'll leave him here. I think it. Oh, there you see. Look at that small little rotation of the camera, and it actually looks like he's going somewhere. That's brill. Oh, Phil. I mean, it's almost looking like I know how to animate. Let's not go too far. Anyway, have a wonderful holiday. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay safe as you possibly can. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. And if you like this, please subscribe for my merry wafflings and learning a bit more about Blender. I have to say that even while I'm doing this, I've been using Blender for a long time, but I'm still find myself learning little bits the more I actually do, in fact, use it. So I just hope that you're okay, and please subscribe, tell your friends if you think they'll like it, or if there's anything in there which you find useful or think they would find useful, and please leave a comment. I'd love to have a comment. I like it when someone gets a comment. It's nice to read, and I like giving you a thumbs up. And even if it's something that I'm not necessarily going to like, I'll still probably give you a thumbs up. Anyway, listen, thanks so much for tuning in, and see you in the new year. Bye.